What's up YouTube, Capital G here, checking out some new cards from Dark Sabers. Looks like Konami just dropped a ton of the new vampire support on us. In fact, this is actually 10 new cards revealed at one time. It seems like they're taking vampires in a very interesting direction. You guys remember when vampires got a bunch of cards in Zexal? It seems like they were, a lot of the vampires were like level 5s and 6s. That really hasn't changed, but they kind of revolved around a little bit of a weird mechanic where you'd send cards from like your opponent's deck to the graveyard, and that would trigger like Vampire Kingdom. You blow stuff up on their side of the field. It was a little clunky in my opinion. This new direction revolves around really paying life points and then being able to gain life points. So I kind of understand that, and to be honest, it just seems a little better of a direction. Like, it seems a lot more practical in my opinion. So let's go ahead and break down these cards. We have 2 spells, 2 trap cards, and 6 monsters. One of the trap cards is actually really impressive in my opinion. Every time I see a trap card of the level, I just like, why doesn't my favorite archetype have that? Anyways, let's go ahead and start off with Vampire Familiar. This is a dark zombie. They're all dark zombies, by the way. Level 1, so 1-for-1 target. 500 attack and 0 defense. And the first and second effects are hard once per turn. If this card is special summoned, you can pay 500 life points, add 1 vampire monster from your deck to your hand, except another copy of itself. And then the second effect is, if this card is in your graveyard, you can send 1 vampire card from your hand or face up on from your side of the field to the graveyard. Special summon this card from the graveyard, but banish it when it leaves the field. So this is a really good card in my opinion. I like the design a lot. It really reminds me of Plague Spreader Zombie actually, because, well, the fact is it does special summon itself from the graveyard, but I like the fact that it tutors for a monster as well, and sending a vampire from your hand to special summon it is like really not that big of a deal because the guy is going to search when it hits the field anyways. It seems like a really good card, and if you can special summon it from your deck or from your hand, it'll also trigger. So keep that in mind for like the 1-for-1 plays. Next up is Vampire Brood. This guy is actually extremely similar to Vampire Familiar. It is a level 2. It has 1200 attack and 0 defense. It's actually quite a shame. I really wish that this card would have actually been level 1 and maybe just had a little less attack, because then you would have had 2 targets for 1-for-1, and I think 1-for-1 would have become like just a no-brainer at that point. But this card is almost identical to Familiar. It just searches spells and traps instead of searching monsters. This is a level 2 1200 attack, so it gets a little stronger than Familiar. The first and second effects are both hard once per turn. First effect is almost identical. If this card is special summoned, you can pay 500 life points, add 1 vampire spell / trap card from your deck to your hand. There weren't that many vampire spells and traps, if I'm not mistaken. There was only like a couple in the game. Vampire Kingdom is not really all that good, so vampires definitely had to have some spells and traps worth searching. I think they actually do, so this effect can definitely come in handy. And then the second effect is the same. If it's in the graveyard, you can send a vampire card from your hand or face up on the field, special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the graveyard. Keep in mind, if you do happen to somehow exceed with this card, these Plague Spreader guys are not going to be banished in that case, but I don't really see that happening. In fact, I think Konami wants you to summon these guys, search a card, and then tribute summon with the vampires, these little baby dudes. Then we have the first level 5 that Konami revealed. If you know anything about vampires, they love level 5s, they love level 6s. If you look at their exceeds, they're all like 5 and 6s. This is Vampire Frilly, which is sounds like German or something like that. This is a level 5, 600 attack, 2000 defense zombie. The first effect is how you summon it, and it's a hard once per turn. When a monster declares an attack, you can special summon this card from your hand in defense position. Interesting, because like you can do that during either player's turn, but keep in mind, if you do summon it during your turn, you're not going to be able to attack with it because it's in defense position. But the second effect definitely kind of makes up for that. Once per damage calculation, when a zombie monster you control battles an opponent's monster, you can pay life points in multiples of 100, 3000 being the maximum. That monster gains attack and defense equal to the amount you paid during damage calculation, or during that damage calculation only. So you can see Konami really wants you to pay life points when playing this deck. I think that's interesting because it does give this card card the potential to go to 5,000 defense, which should make it pretty much unkillable in battle. I can't think of anything that's going to get over 5,000 defense monster, and it does let your other zombie monsters run over stuff pretty easily. I wish that you didn't have to have you didn't have to actually battle with another monster. That would have been dope if you could special summon this card and then have one of your other zombie monsters like attack directly and gain 3,000. That would have been kind of nuts. And then the effect number 3 is actually built into all of these new zombie monsters, the big ones. It says at the end of the battle phase in which this card destroyed a monster or monsters by battle, you can special summon as many of those destroyed monsters as possible from the graveyard to your field. That seems really good. I'm not sure if specifically in this monster it's going to be that relevant, because this monster has 600 attack, so what do you really expect to run over? Unless you, I don't know, if you attack over a Borlo dragon, keep in mind this card can go to 3,600 attack, so Borlo can't really stop it. It is kind of nice to be able to summon that Borlo dragon back from the graveyard. I mean, this is an effect I'm not really going to complain about. I think it's just better on other vampire monsters that Konami just revealed, but it's good to have basically all of these new vampires have built-in Goyo Guardians, and there's no restriction on what position you can summon those monsters in, if you can use their effects, how long you get to keep them, etc., etc. Like, that's a nice little touch. Then we have Vampire Crimson. This one is also level 5, and it's 2,000 attack. This one is 1,400 defense. It says if a monster or monsters you control would be destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect, you can pay 1,000 life points for each of those monsters destroyed. So this is a little bit of like a built-in, well, it's not a complete immunity to something like Regeki, because you do have to have the appropriate life points to be able to pay, but I like the fact that, I mean, if you just run over any one monster, you can just pay 1,000 life points to just save it. I'm talking about if your opponent runs it over. That seems pretty good, although with certain things like Torrential at 3, I don't know, man. If you summon into a Torrential, no, actually, it probably would be worth it. Like, would you pay 4,000 life points to keep all 4 of your monsters? Like, I probably would, because if you can kill your opponent that turn, I think it's definitely worth it. It says at the end of the battle phase in which this card destroys an opponent's monster or monsters by battle, you can special summon as many of those monsters as possible from your graveyard to the field. Again, that effect is built into all of these new big zombie monsters. This will be a card that I think is a little format dependent. By the time these come out, are people still playing Torrential? You know, is Regeki seeing a lot of play? Dark Hole? That's pretty much what we have to ask ourselves. Obviously, you know, the battle immunity is always going to be relevant. People are going to attack monsters, until the end of Yu-Gi-Oh! So that effect is definitely good. I wish it was 500 and not 1,000 though, because when I think of paying 3,000 life points, that is a lot, and that kind of puts you in the danger zone. Next up, we have our first level 6 new vampire. This is Vampire Scarlett, level 6, and this is 2,200 attack, 2,200 defense. That is a really good stat line, by the way. And the first effect is the hard once per turn. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can pay 1,000 life points, then target one vampire monster in your graveyard, except another copy of Scarlett. Special summon it, but it cannot attack during this turn. This seems incredibly good. I think this is easily the best one. Just because it's such a practical effect, to be honest. I mean, vampires and zombie archetypes in general really like Monster Reborns. That's why you have Mizuki that's seen play since like the beginning of time in zombies. Book of Life has always been really good in zombies, and we know that these little guys, the dudes that are basically plague spreaders, they all activate when they're special summoned. So this card seems incredibly good. Like, this seems kind of like it's going to be the 3 of also good defense and good offense. Like, the overall stats are excellent as well, so I don't really have anything negative to say about this card. Next up, we have Vampire Red Baron, and I'm not exactly sure how I feel about this card, if I love it or hate it. It's a level 6 as well, 2,400 attack, 1,000 defense. Are those Monarch stats? I don't know, I just feel like those are Monarch stats. Anyways, its effect says once per turn, you can pay 1,000 life points, then target one monster your opponent controls and one other vampire monster you control. Switch control of those 2 monsters. So obviously your opponent has to have a monster on the field. You have to have 2 vampires to resolve this card because it can't swap itself. It seems like it could be incredibly good if you have access to like Brood or Familiar, because you special summon those little guys from the graveyard, and then you get the Surge and you swap it to your opponent's side of the field, and you just run it over. Hopefully you do a bunch of battle damage, you take their biggest monster, but it does target, which isn't all that great, and it feels like it requires those two monsters. If you're not using those two monsters, then it really feels like, I don't know, it feels like you're just in a losing position. Like if you have Scarlett and you have Baron on the field, you shouldn't be relying on Baron's effect to like completely bail you out. You should have other ways of getting rid of an opponent's big monster or something like that. So this card seems like it could be good under certain circumstances, but just really mediocre in other circumstances. So I'm not exactly sure how I feel about it. Might not need to run it at all, to be honest. I probably don't think you need to run it. We have the spell card Vampire Desire. This is a normal spell that's a hard once per turn. It says you can activate one of these effects. Effect number one, I guess, is target one face-up monster you control. Send one vampire monster with a different level than that monster from your deck to the graveyard. And if you do, that target's level becomes the same as the sent monster's level until the end of the turn. This is good. This is kind of like a little foolish burial to get Brood or Familiar into the graveyard instantly. Now, you will turn those monsters into like, you know, the monster on field will become like a level 1 or level 2, but it's fine because you get your little dudes out of your deck into the grave. Second effect says target one vampire monster in your graveyard, send one monster you control to the graveyard, and if you do, special summon that target. Hey, shout outs to Scapegoat, shout outs to Mizuki. Other good monsters that you could kind of say float. Seems pretty decent. It's basically a foolish and a Circle of the Fire Kings kind of tied into one card. I think that's pretty good, and I can understand why this card is actually a hard once per turn. Then we have Vampire Territory, which is a continuous spell. It says once per turn, you can pay 500 life points. For the rest of the turn, during the main phase, you can normal summon one vampire monster in addition to your normal summon / set. You can only gain this effect once per turn. If a vampire, this is effect number 2. If a vampire monster you control inflicts battle damage to your opponent, gain that much life points. Okay, this seems like it kind of fixes the one of the big issues with vampires, but doesn't completely solve it. That big issue and kind of the elephant in the room is a lot of these monsters are level 5s and level 6s, but I haven't read any ways to just like normal summon 5s and 6s out of your hand, have I? I mean, I think what Konami wants you to do is basically get Brood and Familiar in the graveyard quick, special summon them, and then like tribute summon for your big guys. You will lose your Brood and Familiar because they are banished, but that's what I'm thinking Konami wants you to do with this card. And this card gives you additional summons, so if you want to play Grepher in the deck, if you want to play, you know, I guess maybe Mizuki or Armageddon Knight, other cards that might require your normal summon, then you're not completely out of luck. That's basically what I'm thinking here. We've got a couple of trap cards. The first one is Vampires Awake. This one it's okay under certain circumstances. It's a normal trap. You can only activate one card with this card's name per turn, so it's the hard once per turn. Special summon one vampire monster from your deck, but destroy it during the end phase of this turn. This seems, man, if this was a quick play spell, it would be so much better. It would definitely help vampires with, you know, kind of like having tribute fodder and whatnot, especially considering it doesn't negate the monster's effect. So if you do special summon Brood or Familiar, you get to search them, or you get to search with them immediately, which yeah, the only thing about this card that I don't like is the fact that it's kind of slow. If you're looking to set up a tribute summon, or if you go with like, you know, Vampire Familiar, you special summon it, he searches a monster, and then you just tribute summon for the monster that you just searched. Seems really good. The only issue really is that this is a trap card, so that is just slow. And then for the final card, which is basically an Infernity barrier on steroids, Vampire Domination, it's a hard once per turn counter trap. It says if you control a vampire monster, when a monster effect or spell / trap card is activated, negate that activation, and if you do, destroy it. Then if the destroyed card was a monster, gain life points equal to the original attack of that monster. That is really, really good, and it's definitely a nice utility effect that this deck needs. This deck doesn't really seem to have many ways of gaining life points. You have Territory and you have this counter trap, and that's it. I mean, I generally like to think that anytime a deck gets an Infernity barrier, it's good. The only thing is, I'm not sure if there's enough control here to really make an Infernity barrier shine as well as it does in, you know, like Zephyra or Tellarknights, because those decks do have, like, I don't know, they tend to just run a whole bunch of traps, and they maybe have a little more defensive prowess than what we've seen so far from these revealed cards. So I wonder if they'll even run this card card, but in general, an Infernity Barrier is something that really helps your archetype a lot. So what do you guys think of these new cards? What do you guys think of the new direction that vampires are going in, where they're kind of like life point based? Whatever you guys think, leave it in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already. Turn on that notification bell for daily videos.